Mark, welcome to SHOWstudio. First question, when I was researching you and reading about your work, you get described in lots of different ways, usually as a photographer, but often as a collaborator, filmmaker. How would you describe what you do?
A representer, but also I like to be considered like a family man. Yeah, that's what it's come to. In the old days, I would have just said I take lots of drugs.
Not so much anymore.
I don't do that much. I do very little of that. I do too much sugar and coffee and refined flour, and that spins me out. So I'm still pretty
wild.
I'm pretty wild, yeah.
When you say family man, talk to me about your definition of family, because obviously you have your own family, you have 2 wonderful sons. But what was interesting is also when I was reading about you, it's really rare to read something that's like, Mark Lebon did this. It's often Mark Lebon and, so whether it's like Judy Blame, or now it's like Tyrone, one of your sons, or people talk about you in part of collectives.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you think of that as family?
Well, first I need to get this out of the way, because I find it really tiresome when people research me, it comes out as that I'm a member of Buffalo. And the next thing that comes up is I photographed Madonna, and they're 2 things that I'd really rather not be remembered for, and they're what I'm being remembered for. So I find that quite annoying.
Are you not proud of the work you did with Buffalo?
Pardon?
Are you not proud of the...
Yeah, it was all right, but I was sort of coerced into it, and I don't have any regrets about it, but for me, I sort of found myself when I met Judy Blame and Christopher Nemeth, because they were people who I really shared an aesthetic. I shared their aesthetic, I shared their sort of politic, and yeah, that's when I sort of found myself. So, and I would consider them working family, but then they're also, it's not always sun and roses with the family. You have your rough patches, even with your brothers and sisters and your mum and dad and stuff like that, and your kids. So it's not always smooth runnings. So, by all means, Buffalo should be in there, and so should Madonna. Because it's not always plain sailing. But with Judy and Chris it was, and I don't remember what the question was.
I was asking about your definition of family. Because you said a family man.
Yes, so there you go. Yeah, I have covered. I did actually answer the question then. So amazing. Great. I'm, all human beings, be them terrorists, murderers, or wonderful prophets, or philosophers, I'd like to call them all family. I like to think of Uma Thurman as a girlfriend of mine, even though I've only sat next to her once by accident at La Familia restaurant. She was on the next door table, not my guest, but if I want to think that she's my girlfriend, I can think that she's my girlfriend, which I have done on occasion, but I don't make a habit of it.
So are you saying that you're a sort of, like you've got a badge on that I noticed that says give peace a chance, and I was wondering, would you consider yourself like a idealist or a fantasist?
I would have thought of myself as a bit of an old hippie. No, I sort of believe in the connectivity of all living and less living things, atomic theory and all of that stuff are all made up of the same shit. So, that's how far family can stretch. Family.
But tell me a little bit, it's interesting how you define yourself, because a lot of the people that I spoke to when I said that I was interviewing you, they talk about you in the sense that, like, basically they use other words that mean bohemian. They talk about you being a free spirit, and I'm interested in how much of that is sort of innate and how much of that is constructed, because I feel like you kind of revel in that in some ways.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't really see the difference between innate and constructed. I've never been that boundaried. So, so my sort of creativity and my work life and my family life and my personal life, I'm not very good at compartmentalizing them. Though, more recently, I've understood how useful it is to sort of separate things. Ultimately, I think everything's pretty connected. So, I think I've answered the question, but I can't remember what the question was again.
I feel like this is going to be a pattern, isn't it?
Yeah.
But do you think that your personal life ever suffers if it's too close to your work?
Well, I think, I'm a bit of a Buddhist, basically. The Four Noble Truths, as I understand them, is that existence is suffering. Suffering's created by desire. You can get rid of desire, and you do it by getting shit right. But getting shit right doesn't mean that you're going to stop. There's impermanence as well, which is another Buddhist thing. And there's also duality. So, long suffering. There's always suffering. You mentioned suffering in your question. That's all I can remember about it.
Tell me, what's your idea of beauty?
That's a tough one. When I stopped taking drugs, the first film I made was for Mary Greenwell, and she was sort of expecting something to help her into television, and I made something that wasn't at all useful to her, bless her, but it was very lovely to hang out with her for a year or so. And eventually I made this film called How Does Beauty Make You Feel? So I've long pondered that. One answer was sort of symmetry and balance, and then it was about imperfection and imbalance. There's a side of me that, deeply believes it's an internal thing, and there's another side of me that totally is into the external and superficial nature of it as well. So, it's every stage of a flower's growth, from it being a bud to it being dead. I think sort of being able to be in the flow of things is quite a beautiful thing, because conflict is also quite necessary, but the release from suffering and the release from pain and the dawn and the dusk, the transitional nature of things, the impermanence of things, is actually really precious and beautiful.
Is that why you like fashion, because it is so fleeting?
I sort of think, it's in my DNA, I think, because of, where my parents came from, but also I thought I was like really ugly when I was growing up, And I thought if I could distract someone's attention from how ugly I was by wearing something that was quite interesting, that would be a really good thing. So I sort of got into fashion from that. That was my primary, that was my in point into fashion. It was just as long as people didn't know, anything to distract people's attention from how ugly I was.
Has your relationship with your wardrobe changed since those days?
Probably not much. No, no.
There's a certain irony to that, because the portrait that we used to advertise this interview was you completely naked.
I think I got a woolly hat on, I'm not sure. And also you can't see the trousers around my ankles, or, well, there's my beard as well, and I think I had my glasses on, I'm not sure. But yeah, that was because the person, Coco, who took the picture, said, she'd been asking to do my portrait for a while, and we were on a school trip and we weren't very interested with any of the other teachers or students, so we took it upon us. And the nuclear power station was always an issue for me, nuclear power, so I just thought, great, let's do that. And then she also told me that she was interested in shooting nudes, so we managed to tick a lot of boxes by taking that picture. And we got arrested as well, which was quite an achievement, for indecent exposure. And we spent the whole of the school trip under arrest. And they managed just to let us off just in time for us to get back on the school bus. And then I did the really stupid thing of doing a group email also to sort of the human resources person at the college, who was rather sort of shocked by the image, but anyway, that's another story.
You mentioned kind of school, and I'm interested because you taught for a long, long time, like 12 years, was
Yeah.
it? And tell me, for the most part, did the students kind of exhilarate you, or did they depress you?
I think for the most part, I try not to sort of dwell on the ones that depressed me. I'm sure there were definitely some of those there, but there are a lot of, it's lovely seeing people enthused about something. Yeah.
Do you think you'd be successful if you were their age now, starting out?
I think there's more photography to do than there was when I was their age, but then there are more people doing it, so I think it balances out pretty evenly. I think I'd hope I'd be where I am now. I'm still being introduced to sort of stimulating fashion stuff. Someone was introduced to me by a friend yesterday who's just left St. Martin's, who's done some sort of interesting African stuff. And my sons, I find them quite challenging, what they do as well. They still stimulate me a lot. So
I want to talk more about your sons, but first I want to talk about sort of your family when you were small. You mentioned your parents before, and that they sort of had a formative influence on you going into fashion. And talk to me a bit about your upbringing. What were you like as a boy, and talk to me about your relationship with your parents.
I was always tall. I was always the tallest. I was my mum's favourite. My parents were divorced. I was sent to boarding school at the age of 7 because my mum and my relationship was considered unhealthy. We were too close to each other. So she was persuaded by her psychiatrist to send me to boarding school. And
How were you so close? Explain that relationship.
Well, I just start crying as soon as she left me, basically. That's how I remember it. I was just a total mother's boy. I was just, you know, completely. And she started going through her divorce from my dad around that time, so she started to connect to me. Also, her mum died when I was born, so I became this sort of thing that filled her up, made her feel whole. And then she used to bring me, even though I was like a fortnightly boarder, once a week, she used to bring me a car trunk full of sweets and comics, enough to feed the whole school twice over. So.
Would you say you were very spoiled?
Yeah. And so, you know, I've been pretty fucked up by it all one way or another. And
Tell me more about that, explain that.
Well, I think part of me looking after other people came through me feeling like I had to look after my mum's emotions. And then also when I was at boarding school, I had all of this stuff. So it was like I had to give it all away and sort of look after everybody else in terms of feeding them sweets and comics. And I just became and also because I was the favourite, I always used to try and look after my brother and sister. I've been a big caretaker, so it's very, you know, there's a direct link between that and representing people. I'm very interested in supporting and helping other creative people. I don't, you know, I'm not much of a perfectionist. So, you know, I really admire people like Nick and people who are recognised for, you know, their excellence in the creative field, but if any of that's happened to me, it's sort of landed up happening by chance, because when I tried to control things to make them perfect, it was always a total disaster. I was really a fucking crappy photographer as far as I could tell, because whenever I tried to do something, it'd always go wrong. And then, you know, sort of try to be in control of it, it always went wrong. So I decided, sort of just as I started to launch into my career properly, having moved from assisting, that my signature style, instead of being a control freak, I'd be an out of control freak. So I mastered the act of just not caring and just allowing chance to happen and not knowing really what was going on.
But that's kind of a contradictory thing to like master not caring. It's like when you're caring about not caring.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Like
yeah, it was really good. And drugs mixed in with that absolutely perfectly. They really facilitated that signature style perfectly.
How old were you when you started taking drugs?
I think I started having headaches around the age of 7 when my parents split up. I started getting migraines. So I was introduced to Codis, which is basically like heroin, at a very young age. So that was it. And then just, you know, teenagers.
Do you ever wish you hadn't taken them, or do you think?
No, I don't regret a single solitary drink or drug that I've taken. It's all been part of the course. I'm very lucky. I've had a very blessed life. You know, with all of that. And
tell me about your dad. You talked a lot about your mum.
So my dad was a cosmetic surgeon, and
is that why you thought you were ugly?
No. And he was a cosmetic surgeon, and he made people look more beautiful, you know. Tits, bums, first sex change, hair grafting, all the facelifts and everything like that. He did all of that. And he was, you know, he had television programs made about him. He was quite a sort of one of those 60s characters who hung out with he was gambling partners with an agent who represented all of the American film star and musicians who were sort of drug addicts, and he'd look after them. He was their doctor when they came to London. And the boarding school that I went to was full of sort of like Sean Connery was there opening the Fates, you know, and they're all sort of like very famous sort of people. So I got that sort of weird relationship to celebrity through my dad. You know, I was taken out of the dormitory to watch a TV programme that Alan Wicker made about him, you know, in the headmistress's suite with all of the staff around me. And then, you know, the boobs came out and knives and blood, and I was sort of ushered out to bed again quickly. And so, you know, it's quite, yeah, that's Dad, and, you know, an incredibly lovely, amazing, lovely guy.
Do you consider yourself privileged?
Privileged beyond, yeah. Sort of, my parents were part of the nouveau riche sort of people. My great-grandmother on my mum's side started a clothing business that was really quite successful. And then my dad sort of came from the other side of the tracks a bit more and had to really struggle to make his living, and you know, drank an awful lot of coffee to get qualified as a surgeon. And both of them were teenagers in the war, so, you know, that was a pretty frightening time to be a teenager. So no wonder they're a bit fucked from it all.
And you mentioned that they kind of had a big impact on you moving into fashion, but when did that become a sort of solid ambition? When did you, like, do you remember taking a picture, like, you know, getting a camera?
Well, what happened was I came up to London because my mum was sort of a suicidal as well. Used to commit suicide on a regular basis, or attempt to. And so at the age of, after I'd done my O-levels, and my mum followed me down to the boarding school that I was at, and she sort of OD'd, and I drove her back to London at the age of sort of 15 or 16 in this crapped out old car. Then I landed up living at my dad's, and then I had this whole house to myself because he wasn't living there anymore. And we had lots of parties. We had drugs cabinet upstairs and downstairs, and operating theatres, and loads of bedrooms, and so it was a good place to party. And but I got a bit carried away, as you can imagine, and so I had to get out of town quick. And one of my mates was going to Worthing School of Art, so I joined. So I just got out of London, went to Worthing with him for 2 years. And in that time, I loved all of the disciplines doing the foundation, and but I wasn't very good at drawing, and I thought, therefore, taking pictures was a good thing to do. And I got lost in the darkroom. I loved losing myself in the darkroom, and then there was the whole thing of like. Oh, and then I sort of came up to London and did another really good BA course that I got onto after doing 2 years of foundation. I couldn't make up my mind what I was doing. And that's when I met Ray Petrie and his mate, Mickey Gardner, who was this model who sort of was in Vogue and stuff like that. And that was my first model that I met, and I sort of completely fell in love with her. I thought, and then when I was at college in London studying communication design, which was quite an amazing course to study, Ray started working as a photographic assistant, and started offering me work, and I was committed to the course. I was committed to making this film that I wanted to make my final year, and so I kept saying no. But and also I was quite politically engaged at that time, and it was when nuclear power was becoming part of our national grid, and I felt quite strongly that that wasn't a very clever thing for us to do. But I just lost faith in the political system at that point, and So I thought, what better way to go than to taking pictures of beautiful women, you know? And that's what got me into the job, because I thought, you know, if you're going to die, might as well enjoy yourself on your way there.
So you see fashion as a form of escapism rather than as something that can sort of change opinions?
Well, at that time, it was definitely a wonderful way out. And then what happened was I landed up taking pictures of blokes. And I was crap at, I wasn't very good at making women looking beautiful, but,
why not?
you know, I mean, I did. It wasn't too bad, but, you know, Nick was my contemporary and he was doing such a fucking good job of it. You know, I just felt like shit whenever I looked at his pictures. So I decided I needed to take a new approach to it. And it took years for me to realise that actually what I was really interested in was representing people. And that was more important than an aesthetic. And then my aesthetic landed up being, because I couldn't take beautiful pictures, what I was very interested in was revealing the process. So that became my signature style, was sort of showing the edges of the film, scratched film over, you know, things that were sort of just fucked up, really, basically, that revealed the process.
Doesn't seem like you think you're a good photographer.
Well, I don't know, good, bad, whatever it was, you know, you know, I've got that I offer, you know, I do offer a certain, I have got a signature style, I have got an aesthetic. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. I mean, how one judges that, I don't really know, but the fact is, I've managed to earn a living out of it, which is great. And you know, I feel like I sort of know what I'm about and where it all comes from. You can ask me questions and I'll quite confidently be able to tell you what my feelings are about things. So, you know, for someone who was escaping stuff for as long as I did, for me to sort of manage to live through that and to actually have got to a place where I actually sort of have a sense of who I am and where I'm going is nothing short of a miracle. So, you know, so yeah, it's good. I don't think it's bad, you know. You know, even my worst picture, the pink picture of Madonna looking fucking totally dodgy on the ID cover that I'm going to be remembered for, in all of its agony, you know, I've grown to love it. Things that I don't understand or I don't like sort of challenge me more. And, you know, that's being challenged by something really is, you know, I feel alive when I'm challenged. You know, conflict and stuff actually makes me feel alive. If everything was like really nice, I might as well be dead, because I'm hoping that's what being dead's going to feel like. Just, whew, rest at last. I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Nothing's going to change. It's going to be perfectly consistent. You know, life's, you know, like the to and fro from suffering to release from suffering. It's the ebb and flow, the night and day, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong.
Were you nervous about having your own kids?
Well, I was really shit at sex. I was just a really bad fuck. I suffered from premature ejaculation really badly. And so I used to sort of try and take on the higher ground when I got into bed with someone and sort of thought about the universe and the future and what actually came out.
Did that work out well?
What?
Did that go well for you?
Well, it didn't sort out my premature ejaculation, but you know, I had Tyrone when I was quite young, and I have no regrets about that because I've been able to grow up with him.
To connect for me having Tyrone young and the bad sex?
Well, the sex started to get better when I started to think about connecting with the universe, and that, that when, in sex is life eternal as well. It's manifest. Spirituality isn't, some dodgy religion that you don't really know about for sure. It's totally concrete. It's me talking to you. It's the exchange of energy. Every word that I say is changing the world, be it in a very, very teeny weeny way. It still does it. Well, obviously, when a sperm gets together with an ovary and creates something else, that's quite, that's life everlasting. That's the potential of life everlasting. I mean, every word that I say has that potential of life everlasting. So it's very concrete, my sense of spirituality. It's a real scientific thing. And so I can sort of remember when I made love to Tyrone's mum, I'm sure I was thinking, don't think about coming too soon. Just think about the stars and about connecting to the universe. And it was probably quite a good fuck, So, and since then, since I'm less frightened and since I'm more in the flow of stuff, I don't suffer from premature ejaculation anymore.
I'm really glad to hear that.
I do have a flop.
Congratulations.
I suffer from other things like droop, so I'm still not a very good fuck, but at least it's different.
Got new issues to worry about.
Well,
so you kind of didn't answer my question, which is you talked about being, as much as you shared some great information there, is that you talk about, in some ways your upbringing being kind of difficult, and I wonder, because you've said before that parenting is your ultimate creative outlet, but I wonder were there also certain fears about, like messing up your kids? It's a really stressful thing to do.
Well, I don't think I did say my upbringing was difficult. I think I said it had some difficulty, but I felt incredibly blessed and spoiled. So, I imagine that a lot of my seeming generosity of spirit might come from actually having been very blessed and very fortunate, and I've got a big guilt and survival complex about it, so I've got to give out in that way. Sorry, what was the question?
Just kind of asking about parenting, because it's interesting to say that it's your ultimate creative outlet. Do you mean like, shaping new people? How do you see it? Is it similar to how you see, collaborating in a work context?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's very similar to that. It's just, sharing shit.
Both of your babies, so you've got Tyrone Lebon and Frank Lebon, they're both image makers. Was that a surprise to you, or did you do you think you moulded them that way?
No, I definitely didn't mould them that way, and it's a delight rather than a shock, and it's a wonderful surprise. I mean, I get most of my work thanks to them, so I'm very, very grateful for that, and I love the idea of apprenticeship, and the old family. It's like the old family business as well. There's sort of like this very conservative side of me that sort of appreciates those values, and then there's the other sort of socialist side of me that wants that to spread to the whole of society so that we can all feel that about each other. And there's that example of duality, two very different kind of values being able to sort of coexist with each other. So it's sort of like getting in with the in crowd. It's all very cliquey, and it's who you know and who you've worked for and who you apprentice for and who your mum and dad is and all of that stuff, which is really painful for people who are outside it or who consider themselves to be outside it. But it's just a state of mind, because we're all connected in the same. And if you can get into that state of mind where, like this guy that I just mentioned, this designer I just mentioned, who's left St. Martin's, it was someone completely unconnected from the business who called me up and turned me on to him. And within 2 days of him talking to this person who was completely unconnected to the business, I was on the phone to him, hooking him up with this, that and the other person, putting him right sort of centre stage with the sort of top people that I knew could help him. Okay, he'd been to St. Martin's and done a BA, so that's his groundwork. So you got to do your apprenticeship. And so yeah, from that point of view, it feels sort of quite natural.
So you think there are benefits to that side of fashion where it is, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know? You think that can manifest in a positive way?
I taught, you know, in all my teaching, it's just like the most important tool that any photographer's got is Excel, because it's Excel is the basis of what all address books are on. It's also all of your accounts are done on Excel. I can't remember what the other one is, but all of your contacts and all of your accounts are done on Excel. And that's 90% of what it takes to be a good photographer. You know, the other 10% is that sort of creative bit.
Did you ever worry that Tyrone and Frank...
A commercial photographer. Well, actually, yeah, that's another whole story that we could get into. So the art versus commerce thing, but...
Yeah, you've made some interesting points about that, where you said you almost prefer working in a commercial...
Yeah.
Way. Yeah, expand on that for me.
Well, you know, to me, art with a capital A is actually, you know, and you know, the other side of that is commerce. So people think that one sort of denies the other, which I sort of have issue with. And you know, to me, art with the capital A is much more commercial and sort of who you know and about connections and stuff like that than commercial art with a small a. And so to me, if you agree with that, then commercial art is a bit more honest about what it is. I really worry about upward inflection when I talk. It's like you got to watch out for what you judge other people for, because, you know, when I got clean and sober, I looked around the room and all of these blokes were like clean and sober but really fat, and it's like I've landed up really fat. And also when people started with the coming of Neighbours upwardly inflecting their words, I thought, you know, and I was working a bit with Kylie Minogue, and I just thought that's never going to happen to me, and it has. So I'm sorry about that.
It's all right. It's tolerable.
Art and commerce. Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
It's interesting, just going back to the kind of connections and family thing. Like, we talked about both your kids being image makers. Did you ever worry for Tyrone and Frank that they would have that thing on their shoulder always, where people would be like, yeah, but their dad's a fashion photographer?
Yeah, you know, they're fucked. Yeah. Good job, because they're all so blessed. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of, you know, hopefully in most people's lives it's the ebb and flow of it all. So, you know, we're all entitled to our suffering, and we're all entitled to be free from it, you know.
Talk to me a little bit more. You mentioned, because we've talked about you kind of collaborating with your kids, but I want to go back and talk a bit more about you collaborating with Judy Blame and Christopher Nemeth. So tell me about, you said that you kind of really found yourself, and what do you mean by that? Do you mean your aesthetic, your style, or more like a, you know, who you were?
What Chris did, which I loved, was, you know, I went from sort of being a hippie to sort of being a bit of a punk. Certainly from a fashion point of view, the safety pin and sort of the fact that punk deconstructed clothes was, you know, lovely for me. And utility and army wear and all of that stuff, Nova magazine. And what attracted me to Chris was that he picked up post office bags off the street and cut up his paintings, because he did fine art at Camberwell, and he fused the paintings and the post office bags with old jackets that he picked up off Brick Lane once the market had shut down, because they did the buttonholes and the cuffs, and he just mashed them all together. And it sort of deconstructed what clothes were about, and it also deconstructed what art was about, because he included his canvases in there as well. And he did some paintings on post sacks. And I met him on the street, photographing a job for Swatch Watch when they first launched their watches, and saw this apparition in these kind of clothes, and asked him where he got them from. Where he got them from? He made them. He had a little rack of clothes in Ken Market, which I was very connected to, and I went and got the whole lot. So he had to get in touch with me, because I just got all of his clothes out of the place. And then similarly, Judy Blame had this penny brooch, which was an old penny, and he just stuck a thing on the back of it and had Britannia as the front, not the Queen's head facing out, but that sort of British Britannia, sort of with the trident thing, and sold it for £1. And I just loved that, and it's just so beautiful. It was just like objet trouvé, very much part of the modernist sort of deconstructed movement. And I discovered that was my aesthetic, and it was sort of like a word that I've had to write down. It's undermining, I've forgotten the word. I wonder if I've got my notebook with me. No, but Permain and Permain and Simmons. Max Permain, that guy. Anyway.
Yeah.
They're sort of playing around between fashion and art at the moment, and a lot of people are doing that now.
Simmons Permain. Simmons Permain.
Permain, yeah. And Nick has done it with such integrity as well. But it's, what's the word? Not undermining. It's like fashion undermining art and art undermining fashion. It's, maybe the word will come back to me. Maybe we'll put it on as a subtitle in the edit.
A positive, do you mean it as a positive thing or a bad thing? So, because undermining has like a negative connotation.
Yeah, well, negative, positive, day and night, it's all good shit for me. Do you know what I mean? It's all like that ebb and flow thing. So, negative ain't necessarily bad, because, if electricity was just all positive, it wouldn't work. You know what I'm saying? It's energies.
Wait, it's what? And can you tell me a little bit?
Friction.
Friction, okay.
What would it be like fucking if you couldn't feel anything? It's rubbing up against stuff.
I see. And tell me, you said you were coerced into Buffalo. What do you mean?
Well, what happened was that I sort of decided to start a band, not that I was, just for therapeutic reasons.
What did you play?
The saxophone, not that, I knew how.
I used to play the saxophone when I was a kid, and my teacher died, and I think it was because I was that bad. I really do, it was awful.
Yeah, I wasn't very good, but anyway, it was very nice. And my boss, Cameron McVeigh, had just done the Madness cover, and he saw these young kids who couldn't play music much suddenly get really rich making music, and he realised that he could get richer faster, still being creative, being a musician and a photographer. So he decided to become a photographer. I helped him buy his first bass, and the next thing he knew, he nicked all of my band and made music, and also became best friends with my recently, less than he was before, because we just had a falling out, that's another story, my sort of adopted younger brother, Jamie Morgan, and they both decided to become musicians and dump photography. And Ray Petrie, who was the other person, they lived in flats next to each other that I used to live in before any of them knew each other. Ray was left a little bit out in the cold because he'd lost his two main partners, Jamie and Cameron. So I've taken that to be the reason why my first picture for The Face, which was a really picture that I was really fucking proud of, because I worked for ID and Jamie worked for The Face, the commercial one. I was the fucking street comic, you know, dodgy mag, and Jamie was working for the glossy, shiny money one. And my first picture in there was really, I was so pleased with it. I thought, I'm going to break through the commercial world. This is going to be great. And the credit ran on it, photo, Buffalo, Ray Petrie, Mark Lebon. And it's just like, what the fuck? You know, here's my first credit and it's being taken away. Who's Buffalo? You know, Buffalo was Malcolm McLaren, Vivienne Westwood. What, you know, what's this got to do with any of that? Anyway, so I called them up and it's just like, what's this? And who's on the checkbook? And I wasn't on the checkbook, but they were going to represent me. I was already represented by Camilla Lowther. I'd already started my own production company. The last thing I fucking needed was someone else representing me. They said, don't worry, Arena magazine's coming out and Ray's going to give you the first 2 issues to shoot in that. So it sort of softened the blow. But it did make my life, I mean, my life was pretty complicated anyway, but it made it even more complicated. And
that
I felt like I'd been coerced into something.
Yeah.
You know.
It's strange because Buffalo's remembered with such
love.
Yeah, with such
everyone.
love, but also people I think are very inspired by the way it moves certain things forward, particularly when it comes to sort of diversity and representation of people that you didn't necessarily see in the context of a magazine. And
yeah.
I mean, are you proud of those?
Very, very proud of that. But also I know that Ray and I grew up, you know, looking at Nova magazine, which actually had done all of that stuff in the 60s anyway. And the fact that The Face was so heralded and that Buffalo was so heralded for it, it wasn't anything that new, you know.
What do you think of the current magazine landscape?
Well, you know, there was that time before the internet really pushed into action where suddenly all magazines were going down the plug hole and that the internet was going to see their final demise. And then, blow me down with a feather, desktop publishing produced a plethora more magazines than you'd ever seen before. And
are they as good as they used to be? Are they as good as they used to be?
Well, you know, there are all sorts of magazines. There's much more independence in magazines. It all used to be very corporate and big.
It's funny, a lot of people say the opposite. Most people who I interview there say that, you know, magazines are so corporate now. Nah,
IPC, national magazines, there weren't independent mags, you know. Now there are, you know, there's fucking loads of them. And there's all that internet stuff, there's loads of shit. I don't really look at magazines anymore. Yeah, I look forward to doing my last few fashion editorials, whenever that is. You know,
who would you do them for? ID, because of, you know?
I don't know. Oh no, it's still, you know, wanting to do Italian Vogue or some I don't know whatever the good ones are, you know.
You were talking about the credit issue, and I'm interested in that, like, because in some way, you know, you were saying you're going to get a big commercial job, and in some ways you've never really pursued that kind of, you know, big global photographer thing. Your work is, to me it seems very British, and it's based a lot here and with people who are working here. And was that deliberate, or is that just how it's turned out? Would you say you were ambitious? Did you want a different career to the one that's unfolded?
I don't think I'm really that ambitious. I'm very, you know, I feel very blessed that things have added up recently. You know, there have been times when, you know, when I have had very little money at all, and I've been looking down the back of sofas to buy my son supper, you know, when I was bringing him up. And so, you know, I'm very grateful just to be able to have enough food to get by. So I'm not very ambitious, but my ambition now is to leave everything neat and tidy and accessible, and to be able to tell my story in an accessible way. That's my ambition now.
What do you mean? What do you mean by your story?
Well, you know, I've worked out that there are sort of 8 or 9 strands to my life, and I'd like to publish those 8 or 9 strands over the next 5 to 10 years.
In pictures?
In a publication and moving image, both, and just as an archive.
And what would you want the effect of that to be? Is it for yourself, or is it so other people can see it?
I'd like my life to be on a hard drive, yeah. You know, where it can either it can be dropped and gone forever, or it can be multiplied and be all over the place. I don't know, you know, on one hand it seems like the digital world is really sort of much more secure than the analog one, and on the other hand it's just like really super delicate. So you're not quite sure what it is, if you're getting security or insecurity with it. So I think actually having that mixture of having a publication and having like loads of digital shit would be quite nice to sort of do that.
You talk about like supporting other people, but do you like the idea of inspiring other people?
Yeah, you know, I know that, you know, it's like meeting God, meeting other people. It's just like, you know, everyone, you know, everything. Variety provides real solutions, and reality, you know, if fantasy is something, if escaping was a great thing for me, since I've done less of it, actually facing whatever reality is, wow, that is really fireworks. So, I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, I think you have. I'm interested because it's funny.
What was the question?
I was talking about inspiring other people.
Oh, right.
There's basically, you said when people Google you and they're researching you, the things that come up are Buffalo and then Madonna. But there's also 2 other things. One of them is that David Sims said you were his favourite photographer, or that you inspired him more than anyone else. And the other one is that you live with Kate Moss. So I felt like I should try and cover the last 2 before we kind of round things off.
Oh, yeah,
so
well,
I was focusing in on the inspiring one.
Yeah, well, David was, you know, an assistant at Camilla Lowther's, and I got my first job for like Vogue, Miss Vogue, and I was flown to America, and it was like really exciting. It's the first time I'd done all of that stuff. It was sort of, and it was the first issue of Miss Vogue, and it's like a big break. I was so busy that when I came back to do the edit, I just didn't have time to do it. And I'd started doing this thing of projecting stuff and re-photographing it and mashing it up and sandwiching re-photographed stuff together. And I didn't have time to do it, so I asked David to do it. And he just did a complete and utter botch job of it. And that was it. That was that Vogue thing knocked on the head. I'd put him in a very awkward situation then, bless him. So for him to have said that about me is really lovely. And it also sort of shows that, you know, sort of quite often painful or unpleasant experiences are quite good, you know, good for creativity. And you can hold them. And so I think that sort of whole inspiration thing, you know, if a student hates me or loves me, as long as they do one of those things, it's quite good news. And yeah, Kate was it was lovely because that was at the end of my sort of drug taking period, and it was sort of part of my they were part of my whole heroin chic strand, which is still sort of really undercover. And that's probably the one that should come out once I'm dead. But
Why'd you say that?
well, I don't want to, you know, it's not. I don't want to get. I don't want the flack from it. Yes, what I found wonderful about living with Kate, Mario and Glenn, they were our lodgers when they were first starting their career in the early throes of their success.
So Mario Sorrenti and
Glenn Luchford and
just
Kate, they were all lodgers. And it was that I didn't need to take pictures, I could just live through them. So it was like I was living it large, you know. And I wasn't at all, I was just taking drugs. But, you know, I was living, I just loved it. And I just thought I thought and I think that they're just really so great. I really love them. And I just think they're just totally magnificent, and I just, you know, I just really enjoy their friendship. Not that we're in touch much, but when we are, it's just really lovely. And you know, to be able to call those people my family is sort of like all of that confusion that happened to me from when I was a child. It's sort of like quite peaceful. It's just it's a very real thing.
Is that one of your biggest skills then, is being able to be with other people and make things happen with other people? Because not everyone can do that, particularly in the fashion industry. It's not known, I mean, it relies on collaboration, but it is known as an industry of individual egos and talents.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think that is something that, you know, I was very honoured to take Nick and his family's portrait once for ID, and you know, I think up until then we'd sort of liked each other from a distance, but then, you know, when we both had family and I could see how he was with his family and his kids, and you know, as a family man and stuff like that, and I think he sort of sensed that about me. And even Glenn's had a kid now. So, you know, it's being, you know. And, you know, the other thing that I think is quite important is, you know, if you can pull it off, be long, you know. Don't just, you know, even if it is just a moment, maybe you can treasure that moment and reflect on it and be with it for a bit longer. So, you know, it's important for me, you know, getting older, the sort of time goes very fast as you get older. So, you know, just trying to expand it out a little bit is a great thing. So, you know, that's wonderful thing about this communication thing in the digital world, and you know, that me engaging with you and this situation is like magic going around the world, possibly. You know, someone might see it. And so, yeah, that thing of being is great. And, you know, one of the things that sort of Marcel Duchamp and the modernists seem to, they seem to project, to have this model of what art is, and that it's the object of art, it's the creator, and it's you as the audience, and it's that sort of triangle. And, you know, by reading someone's life story or researching them, you are being with them in a way. You're expanding your relationship with them. And then, so if you research them, there's that. If you look at the piece of art, there's your relationship with that. And then if you see yourself and your reaction to that piece of art as another part of the piece of art, then you're also belonging to yourself, which is a really important thing to get your head around after your midlife crisis. If you're young, don't worry about it too much, but when you hit your midlife, it's like important to sort of get some peace with oneself. So that belonging to yourself is good as well. So, you know, for all of my disdain of art with a capital A, if you put your energies into it and, you know, you can make yourself feel like you belong, it's a wonderful thing. So to be and to belong is great news, yeah.
And is that what makes a great picture? Someone looking at it and feeling that? Seeing themselves in it or seeing what they want to be? Or...
Yeah, I think so. That's definitely part of it. You know, we're in the information age, so, you know, information, be it the research side of it or the internal examination of oneself, you know, this is something, you know, we've all got fucking weirdo computers in there. They're fluid things, you know, that one side makes your heart pump and the other side has crazy fucking thoughts, you know, and they sort of spark off each other. It's fucking a really odd computer we got in there. So playing around with the information is good laugh.
And that's what you'd want to sort of pursue, a good laugh and good work and collaborating.
Yeah, you know, a good cry. You know, I'm always wanting to. I'm so contrary, aren't I? So you say, you know, that, and I'll say, yeah, but the opposite. You know, full range of emotions are good. I'm still not very good at that. I'm still running away from things, escaping quite a lot. But I have lost 2 ounces last week.
Congratulations.
I'm heading in the right direction.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, lighten up, you know, I'm quite heavy.
You're heading in the right direction though.
Yeah, I hope so, yeah. Yeah. More time in the country to do my, to sort out my database and to reconnect to the commercial world and the art world, God forbid. And yeah, just, yeah, the inner world as well. Yeah, it's all pretty amazing, yeah.
Thanks
How are your
Mark.
questions going?
I'm done.
Okay, are we good on time? We've overshot. Great.
Thanks for your time.
5 minutes late, 5 minutes more.